Yo, what's up, Sci-Fam? It's your boy Nickel here, and now we're going to look at how those gametes, those sex cells, turn into a human. So we're going to call this one From Cells to Self because we're going to make a baby. This is how babies are made. The female gamete and the male gamete come together to make a human. So title this page Cells to Self, and let's get started. So remember that vocabulary term we used? Gamete, G-A-M-E-T-E. That is a female, or that is a human sex cell, or any sex cell is called a gamete. The female gamete, if you remember, is the ova, or we could call it the egg, and this contains 23 of the 46 chromosomes. The male gamete is known as the sperm, and it also contains 23 of those 46 chromosomes. Let's try that word over again. Chromosomes. Chromosomes. All right, so when these two come together and the sperm locates the egg and goes to the zona pellucida and drops off its DNA, we call this process fertilization. And it ends up creating a new cell. Well, the sperm's chromosomes enter the egg, and those chromosomes combine, and we end up with a cell that has now all of the chromosomes needed to make a new human. And so we call this cell now a zygote. And a zygote cell contains 46 chromosomes, which is all of the contents needed for making a human. So that means, again, that it has 23 sets of 2 chromosomes. So 2 times 23, or 23 times 2, that equals 46. That's all of our chromosomes. One of the set came from mom, one of the sets came from dad. And now that we have all of the chromosomes that we need inside of this cell has a special name, and it is called a diploid cell. So when we say ploid or ploidy, that's asking, or that's notifying how many chromosomes are in it. And di means 2, so it has 2 sets of the chromosomes needed. The gamete cells, though, they don't have both sets, so they're not diploid. We call these cells haploid cells. So when you have 2 haploid cells that come together, 2 haploid cells make a diploid cell. When an egg and a sperm come together through fertilization, it produces a zygote cell. Now that zygote cell is going to be where we start, and this is where pregnancy then begins. As you have your zygote, which is formed when sperm fertilizes the egg, creating a cell with a full set of chromosomes. Now, as we learned before, in order for a cell to divide, it has to go through this process called mitosis. So once the zygote cell is formed and all the chromosomes are there, it goes through mitosis several times, and it creates this next stage of what we could call being pregnant or pregnancy. The cell is starting to divide and starting to grow, and as it grows, it now becomes something that we call a blastocyst. So the blastocyst is a hollow ball of cells, and it contains basically a ball of 200 to 300 cells. And so that kind of looks like this, where it's like a bunch of cells to start to make a circle, but it's hollow on the inside, and on one side of it, all of the cells kind of clump together. So this is going to be our future stomach right here, or our future hole that goes from our mouth through our stomach out of our anus. That is the beginning of it right here already at this stage when there's only 200 to 300 cells. And so each of those cells then are going to continue to go through that process of division that we call mitosis. And that blastocyst then is going to grow and grow and grow. And next, what we call this, once it grows big enough and there's enough cells, we now have what is known as an embryo. And when we have an embryo then, those cells are going to begin to differentiate. So like the cells closer to the top of where the mouth is going to become. Those start to differentiate into head cells, or the cells we need for our head. The outer cells in this ball of cells are going to start to become our skin. The inner cells are going to start to become our inner tissues. So they start to differentiate and specialize. They're going to start to develop their special functions. At this point, when it's an embryo, it's only about 1 centimeter in length, and it's about 7 weeks old, or 7 weeks after that fertilization happened is how long it takes for that embryo to be formed after several rounds of mitosis. And so when it's an embryo, we have our major internal organs. They at least start to emerge. They're not formed yet. They're just starting to emerge because those cells are just starting to develop into knowing that they are a liver cell or a brain cell. And those internal organs, those major internal organs, are things like our heart, our brain, which is our central nervous system, and then our peripheral nervous system, which is like our spinal cord. All right, we also start to see arms and legs. So those are just starting to develop. So when it's an embryo, it's only 1 centimeter long. It's many cells now after the blastocyst goes through mitosis. And those cells are starting to actually define to become the heart, the brain, the spinal cord, or even an arm cell or leg cell, or cells that are involved in the tissue development for arms and legs. Now that embryo, again, is going to keep dividing and multiplying through mitosis. And once an embryo continues to grow, we now call that a fetus. Now, a fetus is going to be a time when our cells are fully differentiated. So we have cell differentiation. So cells now know their job, whether they're a brain cell or a heart cell or a blood cell or a lung cell. We have cells that have a bunch of different jobs, and we also say that they specialize. So they can no longer, a heart cell can't become a skin cell, and so on and so forth, because they have their special job and they're all different. So cell differentiation and specialization are going to develop as bones. We have tissues that start to form inside of our body, and our organs. Those also start to form as well. So these things start to develop and grow. So you might have a little tiny heart, but then that heart needs to grow in order to produce that baby when it's born. So those cells have to not only know what their job is, but then they have to reproduce so that they can continue to grow the tissue or the organ that they're part of. Now, when we have something that is called now this mass of cells that is developing into this little tiny human, at this point, when it's only a fetus, it's only about 5 centimeters in length, and this is after about 12 weeks. Now, the cells continue and continue and continue to go through mitosis, and this fetus starts to become more and 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 more like a baby, or like what we would see as a newborn baby. And it has to get to that level, so it goes through mitosis several times. And then finally, we have birth. Once it's at its final stage, and this is after about 9 months. So it's the birth of a baby after about 9 months. So what we have here is this process of the ova and the sperm come together to form a zygote. The zygote goes through mitosis and forms a blastocyst. The blastocyst goes through mitosis and develops into an embryo, and an embryo goes through mitosis and develops into a fetus, which is a more advanced form of the embryo. The fetus continues to go through mitosis, and then it becomes what we know as a baby. Yeah, exactly. That's how babies are made.